Chapter 4 of What Happened in Itchaca. Now, we must leave Odysseus in the island of Calypso, and see what has gone on at his home in Itchaca. You have been already told that before he went to Troy he married a wife, Penelope by name, and had a son who was called Telemachus. When his son was still only a baby, Odysseus had to go to Troy with the other chiefs of the Greeks to fight with the Trojans. And now nearly 20 years had passed, and he had not come home, and no one knew what had become of him. What had happened to the other chiefs everyone knew. Some had died during the siege, and others had perished on the way home. The leader of them all had come back and been wickedly killed by his wife. Another had gone to fly from his home and build a city in a distant country, and others had got back safely sooner or later, but Odysseus was still absent. And as has been said, no one knew where he was, or whether he was alive or dead. But it seemed most likely that he was dead. It's no wonder, then, that many of the young men among the nobles of Itchaca and the islands around that came and tried to persuade his wife Penelope to marry again. "It is of no use," they said, "for you wait any longer for your husband. By this time he must be dead, and you ought to have someone to look after your property and your kingdom, for your son is too young to do this properly." Now, Penelope believed in her heart that her husband was alive and that he would come back, but she knew that hardly anyone else believed it, and she felt very helpless. The people of Itchaca thought she ought to marry again. They were very badly governed when there was no king, even if the man whom she chose, for of course her husband would be king, was not very good. This would be better than to have a whole crowd of men coming day after day to the palace, eating and drinking and gambling and wasting the king's goods. So she tried to gain time. She thought to herself, if I can put off these people, suitors they were called, for a while, perhaps my husband will come back in the meanwhile. So she said to them, "You know that my husband's father is an old man, and it would be a great disgrace to me if he were to die, and there no proper grave clothes to bury him in. For you know that he has been a king, and he should be buried with honour. Let me weave a shroud for him, and when this is finished, then I will choose one from among you to be my husband." The suitors were glad to hear this, for they said to themselves, "This weaving cannot take a very long time, and when it's finished, then one of us at least will get what he wants." So they waited. But somehow the weaving was not finished. The truth was that the queen undid every night what she had done in the day. How long this would have gone on for, no one knows, but at last one of the women that waited on the queen told the secret to a friend of hers among the suitors. That night 3 or 4 of them were taken by the woman to the queen's own room, and found her undoing what she had done in the day. So the queen could not put the suitors off any longer. In this way the shroud was finished, and she did not know what to do. Now there was one among the gods and goddesses who more than all the others cared for Odysseus. This was Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and she loved Odysseus because he was so wise. And Athena thought to herself, "Now there are 2 things to be done. We must bring Odysseus back to his home. He's been away for 20 years, and that is enough, and too much. And we must not let Telemachus, his son, sit still any longer, and do nothing, as if he did not care at all what happened to his father, and whether he is alive or dead. It would be a bad thing if Odysseus were to come home and find that Telemachus had never taken any pains to look for him or ask about him. For Telemachus is now a young man and able to think and act." And Athena, being wise, saw that this was the first thing to do, for nothing could be worse than that for any reason father and son should not be good friends. And the way in which she stirred up Telemachus was this. One day he sat among the suitors who were feasting and playing draughts in their father's house. Every day did they come, and they made a sad waste of the things which belonged to Odysseus. The sheep and the oxen and swine were killed for their meat, and they drank the wines from his cellars, and Telemachus could do nothing, for he was but one against many. As he sat very sad at heart, there came a stranger to the door. Now, this stranger was Athena, who had come down to earth and taken a man's shape. When Telemachus saw him, he got up from the place and brought him in, and commanded his servant to set food and drink before him. When he had ended his meal, Telemachus asked him his business. The stranger said, "I am Mentes, I am king of the Taphians, and I am on my way to Cyprus with a cargo of iron, which I am going to exchange for copper. And I have come wishing to see your father, for I knew him and his father also. But now they tell me that he is not here. Something has hindered him from coming home, for I am sure that he is alive. But who are these? What are they doing here? Is this a wedding feast? A wise man would not like to see such things in his house." And Telemachus answered, "Oh, sir, while my father was yet alive, this house was rich and prosperous. But now that he is gone, things go very ill with me. It's been far better if he had fallen in battle fighting against the Trojans. But now the sea has swallowed him up, and these men are the princes of Itchaca and of the islands round about. And they come, they say, seeking my mother in marriage. She will neither say yes or no to them. Meanwhile they sit and waste my substance." Then said Mentes, "It is indeed time that Odysseus should come back and put an end to such things. But it is the time also that you should do something for yourself. Now, listen to me. First call the people of Itchaca to an assembly. It is well to have the people on your side. Then bid the suitors depart, each man to his house. And if your mother be minded to take another husband, let her go back to her father's house, and let her own people make ready for a wedding feast, and other things such as a daughter should have. When these things are done, make ready a ship with 20 oars, and go inquire after your father. Perhaps some man may have seen him or heard of him. Perhaps the gods themselves will give you an answer if you ask them. Go first to Pylos, where the old man Nestor lives. After that, go to Sparta and see King Menelaus, for he was the last of all the Greeks to get back home. And if you should find out that your father is dead, then raise a mound for him, and give him such honours that are due to the dead. And if these suitors still trouble you, then devise some way of slaying them. It is time for you to behave yourself as a man." Telemachus said, "You speak to me as a father might speak to his son, nor will I ever forget what you have said. But come now, stay a while, that I may give you some goodly gift, such as a friend should give to a friend." "Nay," said Mentes, "I cannot stay. Keep your gift, I pray you, till I come again." So he rose from his seat and went out the door, and lo, of a sudden he seemed to change his shape, as if he changed into a sea-eagle. And Telemachus knew that this stranger was not Mentes, but was the goddess Athena, and he went back to the hall by the palace where the minstrel, Themenus by name, was telling the tale of how the Greeks came back from Troy, and of the many things which they suffered because they had sinned against the gods. And lo, in the midst of his telling, Penelope came down from the upper chambers, where she sat, having 2 handmaids with her, and she stood in the door of the hall, having drawn her veil over her face, and said to the minstrel, "Themesus, you know many tales about the deeds of the gods and men. Tell one of these, and let the guests hear it, while they drink their wine. But tell this tale no more, for it breaks my heart to hear it. Surely I am the most unhappy of women, for of all the chiefs that went to Troy, and never came back to their homes, my husband was the most famous." Then said Telemachus, "Mother, why do you forbid the minstrel to make us glad in a way he thinks best? Why do you forbid him to sing of the coming back of the Greeks? 'Tis a new tale, and men always like to hear that which is new. Go back then to your chamber and mind the business of the house, and see that your maids do their work, their spinning and the like. But here I am master." Penelope went back to her chamber without answering a word, for she had never heard Telemachus spoken in such a way before. But she wept for Odysseus, her husband, till sleep came down upon her eyes. And when she had gone, Telemachus said to the suitors, "Let us now feast and be merry. Let there be no quarrelling among us, and let us listen to the minstrel's tale. What could we do better, for his voice is the voice of a god? But mark this, tomorrow we will have an assembly of the people, and there I will declare my purpose. And my purpose is this, that you go away from this place and eat and drink in your own homes at your own cost." And they were astonished by this boldness, just as his mother had been astonished, for he had never so spoken before. And one of them, whose name was Antonius, said, "Surely it is some god that makes you speak so boldly. I hope you'll never be king here in Itchaca, though it is but right that you should have that which belonged to your father." Telemachus said, "I know that is a good thing to be a king, for a king has riches and honour. But there are many here in Itchaca, young men and old, who may have the kingdom now that Odysseus is dead. Only this I know, that I will be master in my own house." Then stood up another of the suitors and said, "It is for the gods to settle who shall be king in Itchaca, but that you ought to be master in your own house and keep your own goods, no man will deny. But tell me, who is this stranger that came just now to the palace? Did he bring news of your father, or did he come on business of his own? Why did he not stay to greet us? He was no common man, I take it." Telemachus answered, "As for the tidings of my father, I do not make any count of them. Whoever it is that brings them, Odysseus will come back no more. And as for the soothsayers, whom my mother loves to entertain, that find out for her what has befallen her husband, I think nothing of them. They are makers of lies. And as for this stranger about whom you speak, he was Mentus, king of the Taphians. So he said, but he knew in his heart that the stranger was Athena." Then the suitors feasted and made merry with singing and dancing, till the night was far spent, and they went each man to his own home to sleep. But Telemachus went to his chamber, and Euryclea, who had been his nurse when he was but a baby, led the way, holding a torch in either hand to light him. And when he came to the chamber, he took off his doublet and gave it to the nurse, and she folded it and smoothed it and hung it on a pin. This done, she went out and pushed to the door and made it fast. But Telemachus lay long awake, thinking of the journey which he was about to take.